Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. Doing okay. Staying busy.
I was just checking some audio to make sure I'm good. Sounds like we're good. Hi,
Very
Deena.
Yep. Hello. How are you all
Deena.
doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It feels like it's been a busy day because even I was like, like I need to go through and maybe update my checklist on things to do. So then I was like, oh my gosh, there's so much to do. So, sometimes putting it down in writing makes it all more real.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I know that's how it works. Okay, so I'm going to be pulling up that training, and I'll give a minute or so for people to join. But I'll go ahead and introduce myself very high level because I do know everyone. So, but as a reminder, I'm Deena Duran. I'm a senior business analyst with HSC Finance Administration Shared Services. So, just like a quick little overview, I technically don't work for HSC Capital Projects, but I do more smartsheet things. And so I had done a smartsheet training on project management, and which is a little bit of an extensive course, but it would actually be pretty beneficial for you all to look into that. So I can add that link there. And the template that they used throughout the training was actually very helpful. And so when I saw that, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to try to create something like that for the capital projects team, because I know that prior to that, so back when we had Ryan Reynolds was overseeing the office, he didn't really have like a uniform system, and which is another thing in case people don't know. Their old manager was Ryan Reynolds, so that was always fun saying his name anytime. So that aside, when Stuart came on board, I was able to show him, and he had really liked it because he saw how it can really create a uniform way to track projects. So that being said, we still continuously make updates, and we're in the middle of kind of drafting some updates. So things kind of change, but I had wanted to schedule time today to really kind of walk through on how to make updates in Smartsheet, how to create a project in Smartsheet, and for a lot of you guys, it's a reminder, but for some people, it's either going to be brand new or even like, yeah, I forget these things. So sometimes I feel like I'm brand new, and that's totally fine. So we'll kind of go across the board. So as a summary of introducing myself, so Deena from HSC Finance Administration Shared Services. I'm kind of more of a Smartsheet expert rather than a capital projects expert. So there's times where I will lean on you all for that expertise. Okay, perfect. Do I have someone that wants to just introduce themselves briefly next? Because I know we do
Sure.
have. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Deena. Tom Lyle with HSC Capital Projects.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tom.
I'm Brett Beatty with Capital Projects, HSC.
Okay, thank you, Brett.
And Ryan Mortensen, UNM Cancer Center.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
Jeff Johnson, pretty much brand new, but also the Cancer Center. Hi, Deena.
Okay, hey, Jeff.
And I'm CJ King with Capital Projects.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so Jeff was just hired on last week, so he's going to be brand new to the Smartsheet component of things. So that's why I was really hoping that we could all jump on, and it's a good refresher for everyone. So perfect. I am going to share my screen. So as a quick little helpful hint, so I'm trying to log into Smartsheet, and so sometimes when you get to Smartsheet, and so I highly recommend, or I'll show you what I recommend. But sometimes when you get to the Smartsheet login page, it's been difficult lately. So if you get to this annoying page, so you'll go ahead and select to sign in with company account. And let's see. Okay, so even it thinks that when it kind of comes up with this screen, it's kind of pulling up the main campus one. So put in your Salute email address. It'll kind of bump you out. It's annoying when it does that. Let's see how far it let me. Oh. Goodness. No, see, it's just very grumpy with me. And so sometimes when that happens, sometimes you need to just go back to smartsheet.health.unm.edu. So when you do that, it should take you to this single sign-on page. This is where you want to be. This is golden. I will say I have it bookmarked in here, but when I bookmarked it, I'll show you. Well, even I'll just do it from here. When I went to bookmark it, it automatically wants to make it like the IDP smart sheet. And so even if I say done, it kind of popped up here. Let's see, I didn't see which folder I sent in miscellaneous. So I do recommend when you bookmark it, if you go to your bookmark and right click on it and go to edit, because it changed the URL. Instead of smartsheet.health.unm.edu, it added the IDP and it added like my policy. And when it does that as a bookmark, this is essentially like a session code. And so once it does that, like after today, it will give you an error like 100% of the time. So I recommend to go in, delete that, delete this, just keep it smartsheet.health.unm.edu. You can change the name to whatever you want. So Smartsheet login, whatever, but smartsheet.health.unm.edu. So that will save you headaches in the future. So that's kind of a good FYI to know. Okay, perfect. So once I am on this page, I'll go ahead and sign in with my regular sign-in credentials. So just the one I use for my email all the time. And I will point out on this, this dashboard has a lot of helpful information on here, such as joining the HSC Smartsheet user group, which is how you get the emails that have like our monthly newsletter, or we'll send out outage notices, things like that. So that will kind of add you onto this list here. To request, cancel, or transfer a license, you can do that through here. If you have a question, that routes to Jillian. If you have a question that's kind of more specific as to this smart sheet that we all do, just feel free to reach out to me, because she just doesn't know the system that we're using. She's really good with Smartsheet in general. Okay, to book a Smarty session, so you could schedule a session with Jillian or myself. I don't have a ton of availability on there. Just reach out to me directly if you need help. But if you wanted to schedule time with Jillian, because you're like, yeah, let me try getting her help on a question that I have, you can always do that through either of these. This is more of like an emailed question, and this is if you want to schedule like a Teams or Zoom session. And if you're using FERPA, this is good information for that, but none of you are interfering with or interacting with FERPA information. So that's student info. Okay, Smartsheet Knowledge Days are coming. Registration's officially open. I'll send you guys that link afterwards because that's helpful to know. We're essentially having like a 2-day conference that's it's through Zoom and in person on just helpful, like a conference on Smartsheet. So I'm teaching some of the courses, Jillian is teaching a few more, and then we have some other folks from around the university that have signed up to do presentations. So it's actually really great. Here, just some other great resources, including some of our lunch and learns. So if you want to learn like foundations and it's presented by Jillian and myself, you can watch the videos here. So those are perfect. Okay. So now to log in. So, and your screen, once it pulls up, may look a little different than mine. I am an early adopter, and so sometimes they push out large updates that haven't reached the general public yet. So sometimes you'll see stuff on mine that's a little bit newer. I don't think we'll run into too much today. Smartsheet is always slow when I'm on Zoom. So as it pulls up. Perfect. So here it'll pull up different suggested things that it thinks you want to work on. So, and that's just kind of based on your history there. Or we could toggle to all workspaces. So typically I go to my browse button. So if I go to browse, we'll see it kind of opens up. We have workspaces, we have sheets. I'm not going to go into work apps for a couple reasons. One of which is that Smartsheet is actually kind of moving away from work apps. So I'm definitely not wanting to kind of push it when they're kind of in phases of getting rid of it. So there's that. For sheets, you used to be able to kind of create a sheet and kind of keep it in your own sheets folder where it was just shared just for you. They're also moving away from that. So typically what you will build is going to be in a workspace. If you're doing something from scratch, you need to put it in a workspace, and a workspace is just a shared folder. So I'm going to go into, we're going to go into capital projects, finance and administration. So for most of you, that's where your projects live. You should have a lot fewer workspaces than I do. Perfect. And then once you're in here, there's a few different components that are in here. And I will point out real quick. So in terms of workspace sharing, when we go to share a workspace, we only want to share the workspace with people who need access to everything in here. So for example, kind of most of the people who have admin access are those that are in HSC capital projects, or we have a couple extra folks, and because they're helping us in creating like a blueprint for Smartsheet Control Center, which is a whole nother thing. But if they could create it, it'll make our lives a lot easier. So we won't go into that today because I don't want to give false hope or anything until we actually have it in place. I do have folks with additional access here. So even for example, like Jeff, I have you as a viewer for now. We could bump you up to editor if you need to edit. There's a couple Cancer Center projects in here, but otherwise there's another workspace that's specific to Cancer Center that you and Ryan both have full admin access to. Okay, so in here, there's a few different things that we want to kind of, some of these we'll glance at and then we'll go more in depth. I'm going to skip the budget template for now. F&A portfolio administration. I'm going to open that in a new tab real quick. So this is just kind of helpful to see because by looking at this, you'll kind of understand how things are structured within the folder once it comes up. So essentially this portfolio administration folder is going to have different things that kind of allow Stuart to look at where projects are at a high level, and then he can report it out to the executives, right? Whether he's to send it to Rebecca or to Dr. Richards. So here is that folder. We'll open this one. So this is kind of more Stuart leaning. because it has a little bit more details than maybe we would share as an executive level update. But as it comes out, this dashboard helps to kind of summarize all these active projects. And so this data is being pulled from all of the schedule sheets. And so you could even see here in the sheet names, all of these are numbered like number 2. And so we'll kind of go into that and what that looks like. But that means that when we're pulling in kind of this information, I'll look at this project summary report. You'd never have to touch this, but I want you to see that when I'm having it pull all of the project summaries on the schedules, I actually have the full workspace selected. Now, the full workspace has 557 sheets, so it's a lot. And then we add new constantly. So whenever we have a new project, we duplicate the folder, and then so it creates another 10 sheets or so. So that number grows and grows and grows. And because we have it selected to share the whole workspace, that's great, because then we're getting kind of the full workspace in there. However, we don't want every single sheet in there analyzed. So the filters is that it pulls the whole workspace, but then looks for any sheet names that contain project schedule. And then it excludes any that still kind of have that temporary project name space. And so I want to show you all this because when you go and create a project and you rename it, you're renaming the sheet name, you want to maintain like project schedule, but you could go and change that first part. So you could customize it to that project and, and taking out this, but keep that project schedule. This will appear if we have a new project getting started, if we have, so new projects, if we have maybe something that is getting started, but we haven't filled out enough of the sheet yet to really kind of start counting it yet. And then like the template. So we don't want to include the template in here, or else we're going to have a few different ones that just are not relevant. So that's why we have those filters. So all of that to say that once you are duplicating the project binder, just try and maintain that wording. So I'll show you when we are creating a new project. So we will right click on the template project binder. And then we're going to go down to save as new. So when I go to save as new, automatically it comes up with copy of, okay. And I'm going to say, okay, demo project binder. I need to save it somewhere. So I'm going to browse in here and let's see, go back into my finance administration. Let's open it up. And so let's say I'm going to pick on Kyle. If it's his new project, then I want to save it in his folder. And so like over at Cancer Center, you guys may organize it differently because, right now, if there's only 2 of you, you may not totally need it to be broken down that way. But for finance administration, we kind of want it to be broken down this way. So if I save it into Kyle's folder, I'll hit OK. And so now it takes me back here. So it's going to save in his folder. We have a demo project binder. For sharing options, it shouldn't matter if this is checked or unchecked because I'm copying it from the template. If I was copying a project because maybe, we have, what was it? Oh gosh, it's, I'm trying to think of my example, like the HRSA projects. Let's say they're so similar to each other that once we created one, we're like, you know what? It's almost all the same information. So we kind of copy it from there. In that case, if you already started sharing that project with, the different users in that space, if you want to share it to those exact same people, then click sharing. If you don't want to, then you can keep it unchecked, and that's fine. I will say that when we were looking at these workspace folks, if they are shared to the workspace, they automatically will have access to everything you create at whichever level they have at the workspace level. So if they have, if we're looking at, I don't know, Kyle Veeder, so he's one of the guys that are one of those consultants. He actually has access to come in here as an admin and change things, and and he won't, because he's a consultant and he's looking at streamlining this process. But so just kind of keep that in mind also when you're sharing information, right? To make sure that we understand that these people can either view or edit or are admin to these spaces. And we could always share stuff individually. Now I'm going to get to that one. Okay, for automated workflow and alert options, we do want that to stay checked. And it would be helpful to include recipients and permission settings. So for example, each Smartsheet for HSC is restricted because IT likes to restrict things. And so whenever you create a new sheet, it actually will not allow you to email people that are outside of the workspace folks, which can be helpful. Frequently, I do have automations that email those people. For example, one that we see on here is Cindy. So Cindy is not shared on the workspace level, but we have automated emails that need to go to her. We have automated emails that need to go to purchasing. And so in order to do that, we have to have the same permission settings that were established. So include recipients and permission settings. So not only will those people have permission, but also the recipients, we don't have to retype in the accounts payable email and Cindy's email and anywhere else that it was maybe an individual person that's being notified. So make sure that's checked. So this one you do need to change and have both of those checked. Data and formatting options, those are automatically checked. Just leave them there. You're good to go. So the only thing we needed to change was this checkbox to include recipients and permission settings. Down here, it asks you if any reports, dashboards, sheet hyperlinks, and cell links, if they want to refer to the newly created sheets, so what we're creating here, or the original sheets. It defaults to newly created, and that's where we want it. So really the only thing we're changing here is naming your folder, the location we're saving it. And if you save it somewhere else, we could click and drag it. So it's not a big deal. And then including the recipients and permission settings. And if you all have questions as we're going through this, please feel free to ask them, because there will be times where I may be going too fast. And so, or you just have a question pop up, especially if it's pertaining to something else that you're thinking about and have worked on. And you're like, because I remember having this question and it's kind of coming up. So feel free to ask. Perfect. So we have that. So as we see, nothing changed on here because we saved it into Kyle's folder. So I'm going to go in here. So if I click on here, I'll look, and there it is, demo project binder. And I see it's owned by me and it was created 1 minute ago. So that sounds perfect. Now, when I click on this binder, sometimes this happens too. So this is a great demo. Sometimes it's still in the process of creating all of those sheets because there's a lot of sheets, as most of you know. So I'm going to refresh it because right now it's saying my folder is empty. So we'll refresh, give it a moment. And we'll see those things pop up. Perfect. Ta-da! Now they're all here. So that's why I'm like, sometimes it takes a minute, but then you're good. As a quick, helpful key, this project startup and closeout, if you open that up, there's actually a startup task list that I think people forget about. So I'm going to open it in a new tab. And while that opens, we are going to go back once it's not freezing. And so we can navigate back here. I could use the back button, or I can, here we can still see I'm still in browse, and I can see that browsing structure. So I'm going to go back up to that folder. Perfect. So here we have, we have a lot of different sheets in here. We have reports and metrics. Typically, you can go and do your startup task list. The reports and metrics, you shouldn't even really need to touch it. That is what's helping to feed your dashboard. And so like 99 out of 100 times, you don't have to worry about touching it. So that's great. If you do have a question on it, or you do think that there needs to be something changed on it, then let me know and I can help you figure it out. In our startup list, this actually tells you kind of the order in which to do things. So first, in creating the project binder, it tells you to go to the template project binder and save as new with the updated project title and PM. So we did that. That's where we put it in the PM's folder. We updated the project title. In this case, we called it demo when we went to save it as new. So completed. And then next, they want us to rename each document in the folder to include the correct project name. So to do that, so we could go to any of these. If I right click, I could go to rename. And just like I was saying before, we want to keep most of this information, but I'll change the project name to demo. And this is one of the things that takes forever, is that you need to do it for every sheet. So right now, when we were looking at that report earlier, this new project schedule that was created is not being pulled into there because it still has that project name here. Once I change that project name and my little greater than less than brackety things here, that's when it's going to start pulling it into that report. So even I may wait on changing this one until I actually have some good data in there. Because right now, the data that is in there is just like a template. So once I do rename all of the documents, then I can check that box. Now here now it wants me to jump to document number 2. And we'll see, I have an automation that automatically logs the date that I check the box. So that just updated. So looking at document number 2 is the project schedule. So I noticed it didn't tell me to do document number 1 yet, but number 2. So I'll show you why. In here, we want to update row 1 to reflect the project name and the project PM. So once that's saved, it's automatically going to update it in many different places. So this is very helpful. So I'll go into that project schedule. Automatically, it put me in Gantt view. And I will say, Gantt view is very helpful for project management. But if I'm setting up a project, a lot of times I like to switch to grid view. So you can easily do that up here. Again, Gantt view, it's helpful for project management. When we're setting it up, sometimes I just want to see my grid. And at any point, you can close this, and then we'll reopen it again later. So now I have a little more space to work in. This project schedule tries to have most of the steps that we need. We will see that at times there may be things that are not, maybe if we're not going into CMAR, if we're going JOC on a project, then maybe we just need to adapt this. We don't need most of these steps if we're going JOC instead of, maybe a full CMAR. So it can be customized. You can go and delete rows. Sometimes when you delete rows, I'm going to show, okay, if we're like, oh, we don't need these. If I go and delete them, we will see suddenly some of those formulas here may kind of break. And so sometimes what I want to do, technically it's a formula, but it's not a column formula. So sometimes I'll just kind of grab 2 of these. And if I move my mouse to that bottom right-hand corner, I can click and drag just like in Excel. And I may bring it partway down. And once I do that, it already like fixed everything. So that was like, ooh, okay, I saw a whole bunch of broken links and now they're fixed. So you can always do that when you're cleaning up your schedule because some of these things are not going to be needed for every project. I'm going to put it back. So just kind of undoing that. Okay, went too far. Good view. Now what we want to do here is update your project name. Okay, so maybe I'll call it demonstration project. And up here, maybe I'll still call it demo because I do have a character limit on my title. So sometimes I have to make that a little bit smaller and that's okay. And for this one, we put it in Kyle's folder. I'm going to go ahead and assign it to him. Okay, perfect. So now it's assigned to him. One of the things that we're pulling in, so we have information in the sheet summaries that's pulling in a lot of information. So for example, it's pulling the project name, which is actually a formula that's just literally equals this cell. So once I change my task name, the title here, that pulls it over. And it's the same with project manager. I'm having it pull that top assigned to PM. If, let's say for procurement, I'm like, you know what, this one, and this is a big project. I have Kyle working on it, but this is also going to be a steward. So I have both of them. And so I may do that. And I maybe with the understanding like Stuart is not doing the full project, but he is going to be helping with procurement. When we get to pre-construction, I'm going to say that is going to be Kyle. However, there's times where I may say, you know what, when we got to construction, we ended up switching and now, let's see, we're switching and Tom is going to be taking over the construction portion. So then if construction is such a big portion that maybe I'll also update this and be like, okay, well, Kyle is still, maybe it's both of them, but if I'm going to switch it to Tom, I can also switch it up at the top too. So that's fine. The reason that I want to include names in these gray rows is that I have a formula here that pulls the active phase. So this formula basically goes and it looks at the percent complete. It ignores the top row, looks at the rest of these gray rows that are, it's a procurement, pre-construction, approvals, construction, closeout, and warranty. So it looks at those rows and it's going to see, it's going to pull whichever one is not at 0%, basically, to see what the active phase is. So if we are in procurement, it'll tell me procurement. If we are in pre-construction, it'll pull pre-construction, and that's based on those percentages. So that's where it is important to kind of go and update percent complete as you're going through your projects. So if you know, okay, we finished A&E, so like, perfect, I'm going to update that to 100%. Once I do that, procurement just updated because it's a parent of the architectural and engineering RFP. So that updated, and then also our overall project percentage updated. And I will note that this is outlined in gray because I cannot go manually change it. So if I want to say, oh, we're 100% complete, if I try to type in it, it'll tell me I can't because it has subtasks, which are also referred to as children. So if a row has children indented underneath it, which is, we can see kind of, you know, these pluses and minuses, it shows there's a relationship there. And so those subtasks roll up into that. So for example, if I said, CMAR, we completed that one, I can't update it because there's children underneath. So I may need to go 100%. And I could drag it down to the rest of them. Boom, good to go. So it updated the CMAR to 100% and then procurement to 100%. This updated its percentage to kind of track that. This percentage is based on duration, essentially. So if it recognizes that like A&E is 151 days and CMAR is 75 days, so meaning that overall procurement is going to be 243 days. It looks at that in comparison to kind of the overall duration. So the more that things complete here, I mean, even construction, right, is 410 days. It's going to take up a whole huge chunk of that, which makes sense, right? So we want for that to update. So we have those that all kind of roll up. Now, when let's say RFP is submitted for CMAR, so we'll leave it like that. That's why right here, it's pulling my active phase as procurement. And then what it does is, let's see, we have a column further to the right, a little hidden, and it's looking at those gray rows, which row 2 is still one of those gray rows. For PM allocation, this is basically how much time in terms of FTE that this phase will take. So, and we put in estimates. So Stuart and I kind of went through and we're like, well, this should take about this much of a person's time, just on an average week. So for procurement, we said kind of 0.1 of time. So it's a little more time intensive than maybe approvals. And that's largely because approvals, you're like getting stuff ready, but sometimes there's times where you're waiting and, to have the actual meetings. So maybe that doesn't take as much time. That number, so that 0.1 feeds our sheet summary. So basically it comes down here into each project manager and it pulls the sum of that column. So 0.1, if the status is in progress. So if we see it is in progress, going through it, for whoever is assigned to it, including if it's multiple. So if, this one I was looking at Brett's. So if it has Brett, so his name in there as assigned to, then it's going to pull whatever that allocation number was for that project. So for example, this one we had assigned to Kyle and Stuart. So we see Kyle's is at 0.1 and Stuart is at 0.1. And everyone else is in here, but at 0 because they're not assigned to this one, which is in progress. If this one started to enter in progress, I'm going to say, let's say that was, well, now it's pulling in, this was 0.15, but if they're also working on procurement, it's pulling in the 0.15 plus the 0.1 from procurement. So just so you can kind of see why it's important to keep these updated. We want to have kind of the best FTE numbers on here in terms of accuracy. We want to best correctly estimate how much time people have available, right? If you have 8 different projects and they're all at a certain phase where you're like, they require so much time, then you may be over capacity. So we want to see that and to be able to use that information. And right now, I don't think there's much room for hiring, but if that helps to distribute work and we're like, okay, a new project is coming in. Well, I know so-and-so is already like totally up there because we can easily go into the report that was in this dashboard. If I could easily go and see it, so like these may need to be reviewed, right? Because these don't look the most accurate, but that's why we also want to go through, check and make sure, because I'm thinking that, Brett may have either an older template that doesn't have his name on a lot of those, or maybe we haven't added his name into that level, because I know Brett's a lot busier than 0.4. That being said, Kyle's busy, but like 3 full-time jobs, I think that is maybe not accurate. So it's good we'll go through those and just double check those and see we're pulling these numbers from somewhere. So where are we pulling them from? And maybe it's stuff that previously was assigned to Kyle that still has his name listed on here. But if he's not actually involved in like the construction anymore, make sure to update it. So this is perfect to know. On your project schedules, whenever you're starting a project, you do need to go through, update your dates. We have predecessors set up on things that are related. Generally, you won't need to change predecessors, but you will see once you start changing dates in here, because if this is an active project, it's set to 2029. That's not accurate. So go through, update your dates. It sometimes takes some time, but typically the only columns that you really need to update are going to be start date, percent complete, duration. Maybe assign 2. On an average week, when you're updating these sheets, I think it's a great practice to like set aside time, like, okay, every Friday from 8 to 9, which is even going to be an overestimate once you're used to doing this, from like 8 to 9 on Fridays, or better yet, 8 to 9 on Thursdays. So right before you go in to meet with Stuart, because I know you guys have that time scheduled from 9 to 10. So maybe Thursdays, 8 to 9, I go through each of my projects. Typically, you won't need to change assign to, because once you change that, maybe it'll change a couple times through the whole project, but probably not. Start date should actually be pretty good to go in terms of updates. So you probably just need to change your percent complete on your average week. So you go through and you're like, okay, so RFP posted and is open. So, okay, I'm changing that to 100%. Pre-bid site tour presentation. Okay, so we completed that yesterday. So that's at 100%. The Q&A window. Okay, we are 2 days out of 10 days in. So I'd say, I don't know, whatever, 20%. So perfect. We're 20% done with that. That just helps to give you an accurate number here and here. And then it keeps that project completion moving along. So that's perfect. If on an average week, you just need to go through, update your percent complete on your project schedule, that is not too tricky. And I think that because there's so many sheets here that it definitely feels overwhelming, especially when we get into the purchasing sheets. But for a project schedule, once it's established, and that does take some time, it does. But once it's established and you're just kind of doing this maintenance of it, then it should be fairly good to go. Before we move on to the next sheet, I do want to go into construction. We do have kind of pre-construction meetings. We added stuff like abatement in here to help stand as a reminder that the space might need to be abated. Most of these buildings are old. That's not unusual to come across. We have like 60, and these are work days, by the way. So 60 work days that are laid out. So sometimes that will take some time there. For construction, I have that duration as 337 days. There is almost no detail in here because it's left incredibly vague because projects are so different. And so what helps a lot of times is if your construction team has their own Gantt chart and project schedule that they publish, we can go and link it in here. So Stuart does that with one of the cancer center projects, is that he receives a project update every month from there that has the new project schedule with all of their updated percent completes. we don't want for you to duplicate that information because it's just so much. It's a lot of information, right? If I were to jump over to that schedule, there's no way I'm even going to copy and paste that in here because it's a lot. So I will let the construction schedule rest in, in that case, like Bradbury Stam's construction schedule. I'll let them do their thing. I may hyperlink it and pull in some of the data like the start date, percent complete, and duration. And so if I do that, it will help so that way as they send me a new one, that it will update on my sheet here. But I don't want to recreate it. That's too much work. It's not an effective use of your time to do that. They're already creating it for you. So that, I would say, the construction is very, very vague because of that. Down here, we do have some of the average like project manager items that you need to be sure to include stuff like badge readers and art, because that does involve more of your direct time, as opposed to construction is more so managed by your construction folks. But because you need to coordinate badge readers, and really we should have lock shop in here too, and the artwork, even if it's just kind of reaching out to Ellie Kane and being like, hey, I want to connect you with the department. But that's more connecting them would be on you rather than being on Bradbury Stam, right? And to close out again, some of these are a little bit more vague and are warranty walk. So there's a good reminder that there's a warranty walk at 6 months as well as 12 months. So that should kind of be a perfect outline there. So I made a lot of changes to this. You can save. Otherwise, it did pop up and it's like, hey, it's been a while since you saved. If I try and leave this page and go somewhere else before I save, then it usually will pop up with an alert if it hasn't auto-saved. Okay, project schedule takes up a ton of your time. So we will go into the next one, which is the project estimate. When you're starting a project, this is also going to take some time. So if we have a planning vendor, okay, I can add whoever that is in here. So, okay, I'm going to say like Paige because they were the planner that we had for School of Medicine. Okay, and then the design team, that it might be the same, it might be different. So we could go and put that in here. But if I know that, Paige is going to charge, okay, 500,000. So I'll put that in here. Gross receipt tax. I don't know. I'll even do math. Let's see. Times 7, something like that. Okay. So that's a lot of tax. Okay. So we have that. These should also be a sum of children. So what we should see is that when we update these are supposed to automatically update. And so let's say if I have, and actually School of Medicine is kind of good for this. So if, let's say I had vendor 2, let's say I had 2 firms working as a design team together. And if we're paying them separately, maybe I'll say, okay, that one was 1 million. And let's say, vendor 2 is either charging more or doing more of the work, different amounts. As long as that formula is in here correctly, we will see it should automatically do the sum of those children. And we'll see it here too. So that should be perfect there. Now, these totals end up being pulled over to the 3C sheet. So this is kind of a good way to go through. This creates that initial project estimate, and we're even looking at changing this process a little bit. So that's one of the things that Stuart's been working on, to try and get a way for us to get a fairly accurate early estimate. So we don't have that done yet, but that's where we hired the consultants to kind of manage that, and then an overall blueprint. So this process may change in the future, so I won't spend too much time getting in there. But next we have project revenue. So as that pulls up, the project revenue, we want to know, where is the money coming from? How much money do we have? So we have a couple examples that are in here, like a HRSA grant, New Mexico State Appropriation, and HSC matching funds. So it's not unusual for us to say, okay, so it's a state appropriation, let's say, we may have an index that it's feeding. The reason that we may have an index kind of for each line is that there's certain grants that need their own index, and they're like, it cannot mix with the state appropriation funds. It cannot mix with the matching funds. So if it needs to be in a different index, this is the perfect place to capture that. A lot of times, like for state appropriation and HSC matching funds, they may get the same index. So for a project index, I was trying to see if I can remember one off the top of my head, but these two, it may be matching, and that's totally fine. You just want to be careful with grants and how they pay out. Sometimes certain grants may say, we will pay for this, that, and the other, but not X, Y, and Z. So there's times where you have to pay attention to what POs are paying what. So sometimes it's easier, right? If you have a grant that's like, we will only pay for design, but we will not pay for construction. So this grant was just specific for design. So then you can have your design PO connected with that index. And so, for my HSC folks, that means that you'd have to get that to Cindy and be like, okay, so for, here is the quote that we have. I need it to be with this particular index. And so anytime we're paying, that vendor, and we know it needs to go to that particular index, we're good there. So sometimes it gets messy. So we're looking at trying to find a way to help make that less messy. Okay, so revenue amount. This would be the amount. So if we got $10,000 from that HRSA grant, so great. Let's say we have $50,000 for matching institutional funds, and we received 10 million from the state. So that's great. Let's see, it was, okay. Actually, maybe I'll do a general obligation bond, whatever. This just helps me for later. If I have that appropriation ID, whenever this is created, so if it's tied like with the New Mexico State appropriation, if I have that in here, as well as if there's a match requirement, kind of the reversion date and the legislative language, by including that stuff in here, that helps me later, right? Not every project has legislative language, and it may only be on one line item for the state appropriation. But by just copying and pasting it in here, that helps me so that way later I don't have to search for it when I'm wondering, wait, did we say we were going to build, design, and equip? Did we say equip, or did we not include equip? Like what can I charge to this index, because we need to know. So by putting it in here, it helps to keep all of your information together just in the Smartsheet, and then you're not hunting it down, going through. I mean, otherwise you're like digging through the House bill to find it. It's more helpful just as you gather all of that information in the beginning, put it in here. So that should be helpful. Okay, so I'm going to save that and move into our next sheet, which is project costs. Now, this one may be one that you may update more so ongoing. What we'll see here, so if I have a planning vendor, so let's say I had Paige. I need to make sure that however I put it in here is going to match my invoices sheet. And so I know I've kind of made sure to point that out to some folks, but I definitely want to emphasize it. And that's because I have formulas that are it's pulling that information from my invoices sheet, from my change order sheet, and pulling it automatically into here. So for example, you know, you don't need to know the formula because you don't need to change anything. But this one is pulling, just as an FYI, it's pulling the total cost from the change order sheet if the vendor on the change order sheet matches this vendor. So if they don't match, because here we said Page, but on the other one we put like Southland Page, then that will not match. It's the same thing with Bradbury Stam. If we put Bradbury Stam on here and on the other one we just have Bradbury, they're not going to match. So if we put it on here, I'll even copy it. And then for the sake of kind of testing this out, I'm going to go over to my invoices sheet real quick. So I have my invoices sheet. Here is that column, that vendor company name. If you notice, there's a tiny triangle in the corner of each of these because it's being pulled in a formula. So if there's a reference on another sheet that's pulling that information, it'll have that little black triangle in the corner. That doesn't mean you have to do anything different aside from changing that option and copying and pasting. So if I right click on the column name, and if I go down to edit column properties, we see that this column is a drop-down list column. So when people interact with it on the form that we ask for our vendors to fill out, we want to have these pre-filled. So if I paste it in here, then I know that Paige could come through here, and when they do their form, they could just go and select their name as opposed to, typing it in, because they're not going to type it in the exact same way you have it, because odds are that, they won't, right? We have people will type in Bradbury instead of Bradbury Stam. So if I said, okay, Bradbury Stam, I could even, copy from here, select OK. So now that's going to be an option in the form, which we'll go back to. But now on my project costs, I said, okay, I have Bradbury Stam for my construction vendor. I can just paste it in here. And so now if I have any invoices come through for Bradbury Stam, it's going to pull that into this row. If I have change orders that come through for Bradbury Stam, it's going to pull into this row. And so I want to do that not only for invoices, but also for my change orders. So if I go to change orders, vendor, subcontractor, we could even see the little triangles were there. So I right clicked. I'm going to go to edit column properties, and we see I don't have any in here. I had Page, and I just put it as Page because I know there was that. And then now I'm pasting in Bradbury Stam, and I'll say, okay. So we'll come back to change orders. Okay. So here in my project costs, it helps once that purchase order is created to pull in that purchase order number. I recommend to do that because it helps to have your information all together. If you have multiple POs for one vendor, you know, we may need to format it differently, and I can help you work on that, right? But otherwise, you know, this just helps to have your information together. And for account code, that's just kind of helpful to have. And so, for example, if it was like general services, let's see. Yeah, so we have these ones that are already kind of available. So architecture and engineering services that, you know, so that might be good for planning or design. That one I'm not as worried about. Now going here into the totals. So we see on this sheet, there's some blue triangles. So blue triangles indicate that there's a formula that's also a cross sheet formula, but that this is where it's going to. So if I look, sure enough, this is pulling the invoices. Let me click on it again. So it's pulling from the invoices sheet. It looks up the vendor, right? So if the vendor name on the invoices sheet matches the vendor that's at this row, which was Paige, then it'll pull in the sum of the invoice costs column on that sheet. So if we have Paige submitted 5 invoices, those 5 invoices are going to come over here to the actual costs to date. So that should be perfect there. Now for change orders, it's pretty much doing the same thing. You know, change orders, if the change order is approved, then it pulls that in, because we may have change orders that are not approved, that they submitted and we talked about it and we decided, no, we're not going to do it. You know, maybe we were looking at changing the scope. Once we saw the price, we said, no, thank you. We're going to stick with the original idea. So if it's been approved, it'll pull in based on that vendor subcontractor name. Change orders will impact the PO encumbered. But, you know, when, let's say Paige, when they have a PO that they have on file, if they submit change orders, when they bill out, they're still billing out to the same PO. So that's why we see that there isn't like, for the change order line, there's no actual costs in here, because when we're pulling from that invoices sheet, we can't necessarily distinguish what charges are connected to a change order, and that's fine. So we just kind of need everything that Paige is charging for architecture and engineering services gets pulled in right there, and it does it automatically for you. So that way you shouldn't have to touch it so much. So this sheet may need some kind of setting up here, especially those first few columns. But as we scroll across, we'll see that like the revenue here is pulling in from our revenue sheet. So there's helpful things like that where you shouldn't need to touch it. This sheet has a sheet summary page, but this is also something you shouldn't need to touch. This is more of an FYI that it's there. It's pulling in project name, you know, these different, like the total revenue, the all of these, because that's what reports up into those executive reports. So if we need to pull maybe the total revenue, which is telling us kind of what that overall total project budget is, because that's how much money we've received. So maybe I need to pull that information. That's just kind of done at the report level, and it's pulling the sheet summaries from the cost sheet, just like we saw in the project schedule sheet. Okay. So this is a good sheet to keep an eye on, but once it gets set up, you may not need too much going on in here, because when it comes time for the budget, if a project is established and going, you're probably going to be spending your time in the schedule, the invoices sheet, and the change order sheet. So now invoices. Submission date, that's automatic, so that's nice. Let me show you what that form looks like. So each project has a unique form here. And so already I see something that I think Tom and I had worked on, and something that we like to do. So maybe in here, I'll do it right away. So my little form kind of populated underneath that invoices sheet. I'm going to go to the little 3-dot menu. So I could go to the 3-dot menu and click edit. Otherwise, there was an edit in the corner. Really, the only thing that you may want to edit in here is adding the project name. We called this one demonstration project. I may want to center it so it kind of looks a little nicer. But there we go. So that way, if I have Bradbury Stam working on like 3 different projects of mine, they remember they're like, I have like 3 different invoice links and I don't know which one is which. If you add that project name in here, then that helps them to see. It's not automatically in there. I couldn't find a way to necessarily like dynamically link it, but you can always add it in just to make yours a little bit more clear. So I'm going to hit save. Okay, so here's that one. If I refresh, we will now see the project name in there. So when they submit their information, we need their name, email address, and the company and vendor name. This is an invoice sheet, so make the vendor do it. They want to get paid. They have accountants that will do this form for them. It may not be, the foreman that you're working with all the time, the superintendent, and that's fine. If you send this to them and they understand that this is how they get paid, it will encourage them to do it because at the end of the day, right, money speaks. I don't necessarily want for this to be put on you because it's more work for you to do. If you can just provide them that link, which is, again, unique for every project, if you provide them the link, then it makes your job easier. So that helps. Here we see those project drop downs. So I'm going to say, okay, if this is for Bradbury Stam, and I'd have to put in my name, email, and it does verify if it's an email address. So if I just put the beginning of my email, it knows it's not a valid email. So that's nice. And then the payment method. So for my finance and administration folks, most of these are probably going to be a purchase order, right? So now it asks for the PO number. If it's a P card purchase, I can select that. And the reason I call out my finance and admin folks is that both of these will route to Cindy, but it's going to have different messages. If it's a purchase order, then the message is basically going to say, hello, Cindy, we received, this invoice. It's been approved once you approve it. And, please pay out this amount towards this PO. So that way she knows. If it's but also if it's a purchase order, once you approve it, we also are sending it to accounts payable because they need that information in order for them to update it on their side. If it's a P card, it's a little bit different. So I'll go into that after Ryan's question.
Thanks, Deena. And it might be a question for the HSC PMs here, just on workflow. When I'll just take my project, for example, over here at Cancer Center. When we get an invoice submission, they submit it for review, right? And it's review with me or, the PM, the architect. And if you have a cost segregation going on in the project, it's also for the cost seg consultant. Are you guys having them submit that invoice here, or is this when the invoice is ready to be paid and approved by everybody? Is it kind of a 2-step process?
So, and that's even a question that I think Kyle called me last week. And I think it was with CJ that we had this question. Probably the best method to do is maybe, let's say it's your contractor but they need to get that approval from the design team first. It may be better for them to reach out to the design team with you copied via email. And once that design team approves, they can send it back to the, construction vendor, to Bradbury Stam. And then Bradbury submits it after that approval has already happened at that level. And then so when it finally gets into the sheet and has, it's waiting for your approval. But by that point, the design team has already signed off on it, and physically signed off on it. So they would upload, because there's a place we'll get to for an upload. They'll upload the signed copy. Does that help?
Yeah, they typically want our signature on their pay app as well. I
Okay.
think I don't know if it's for their record. So there's like, the way I'm doing it is they send it to me and the design team, right? They ask for our review and approval. I always have the design team review it first and place their signature. Once they're done, then I do my own review. And then if I'm okay with it, I'll sign it. And then after I sign it, I come in here and I go through this process myself. I don't have Bradbury do it.
Mhm.
And I just don't know how that affects the contract, because the contract says we have to pay, or we have 10 days for review, right, from their original submittal. And I don't know if having them submit twice, if that's potentially causing some issues there. I don't know.
Yeah, and essentially we don't want for them to submit it twice. But if you do need to sign off on it, it might be helpful to, if they email it to you, you sign it and then send it to them. Or what you can always do is that after the architect has reviewed it and signed off, then they submit it through here. And then you can always download it, sign it, and then upload it again onto that row before actually submitting the approval. And that's where we haven't necessarily been uniform in how we've been doing that.
Isn't like when you approve it though on this page, isn't that kind of verifying that you're authorizing payment?
Yes. So
Yes.
Deena, let me interject for a second. It sounds like somebody's introduced a couple of extra processes, Ryan. What should happen from a contract basis is, you're right. There generally is a pre invoice that has to be approved and notarized by the design team, the architect or the engineer in this case. And generally, that's an email that goes to the architect from the contractor and then goes to you, so you can look at it as well. And that's not a submission. And then after you've reviewed it and made your comments, and after the architect has certified it, they'll send it back to the contractor, and then the contractor should upload the actual invoice at that point. But your signature on it is not necessary by anybody's means other than someone's request. Because when they get submitted, you're going to approve you're going to approve this form as it comes through, that the PM has to approve it. So that's your approval. Signing it just adds another step for no reason. But somebody's requested that, and I don't know who did that. Was that the contractor?
Yeah, it's on their pay apps that Stuart and I have been signing for the duration of this project.
Really?
Yeah, we're on pay app 18. It's been there since pay app 1 for the owner to sign and the design team to sign.
Yeah, that just adds another step to the because you're going to sign it. You're going to approve it anyways through the PM process. All right. Well, you've figured out how to do it so far, so.
Yeah, we're just working outside the system until we get all those signatures on it. Then, I've been uploading it myself through this process, but just didn't know if there was a better way.
And I could,
Yeah.
to Ryan and Dina's, the question that Kyle asked you about last week on the process on doing it. They're supposed to be uploading their first pay app to me sometime this week. So we'll see how it comes across and how it works.
Okay, wonderful. And I'll show also how these approvals look on your all side. because there's a couple nuances there that are very subtle, but are very important. So, so that they're kind of good for us to walk through. So kind of quickly looking at the rest of this, we have, if it's a purchase order, they put in the PO number. We have the invoice number, invoice cost, and then whoever the project manager is that will be approving it. So in this case, right, we had it in Kyle's folder, so we would do that. And then any additional comments, it's not required. So sometimes they may include something helpful. And then that file upload. So we definitely need those invoices. We need at least one file, right? To show all of that. Okay, and then they will submit it. When it goes to the sheet, it will appear as a line item on here. So we'll have the submission date, so that logged out automatically, the individual's name that submitted it, the vendor company name, email address, comments, the payment method. Okay, so that's where we saw if it's a purchase order or P card, and the PO number. So you will need to kind of go through and review everything on this line. There will be attachments to the row. So when you, and usually that will be lit up blue to show that there are attachments, but they will be located right here assigned to a particular row. So that actually makes it really easy to keep your information grouped together because they are specific to each entry. Now here we'll see project manager email. So based on whoever they selected, this is a locked column pulling the PM's name. And we only really have that because of how we have a sheet that's pulling all of this together onto a nice, concise PDF, which looks really nice. So for PM approval, so you'll go through here, everything else up to this point is going to be filled out. We have the PM approval and approval date. So you will receive an email that will have an approval request. When you update that approval request, so you'll open it up and it'll have all of this information in here, and it will have a green button to approve and a red button to deny, making it nice and simple. So once you check the attachments, you're making sure that the amounts are correct and what is listed on here. So just verify that information. Make sure that that looks good. Make sure that the PO number is on there and accurate. If they made a typo with that, we just need to know, because the information that they put on the form is what's populating in this sheet, and whatever information is populated on this sheet is what's going to be added onto the nice, it's like a pay app cover letter type of thing. If that information does not match, purchasing gets upset, and we don't want to make purchasing upset. So we're trying to like match all of these things, right? Similarly, if their invoice number, if they just said pay app 2, so maybe when they submitted their form, all they said was pay app 2, purchasing is going to get mad because they don't want an invoice number that's just called pay app 2. Because it's not unique. You're going to have a pay app 2 on this project, on, I mean, dozens of projects. Even on this one project in particular, it might have more than one pay app 2. So if you see that they submitted pay app 2, it helps to also include maybe the PO number. So if you said like PO 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then, I don't know, an underscore, and said pay app 2. Double check the invoice number to make sure that that number is unique. At no point in here should it repeat, right? But also, if you were to go from one project to another, we don't want to see that number repeating. So by adding something like the PO number, boom, now there should only be one pay app 2 for that particular PO. So now it's unique and purchasing is happy. So just kind of a quick thing while you're looking here and checking that it'll do that. Yeah, that will fill automatically the PM approval. So once you hit approve or deny from that email, that happens automatically. And your approval date will happen automatically. So perfect. Now, if let's say you didn't do it through the email, let's say you came and did it through here. Okay, so automatically when someone submits it, it'll update to pending. But once you approve, and it changes the line to white. So if you approve, great. But we still need to do that checkbox to send to accounts payable. Before you do that, you need to approve and you need to save. Okay, you need to save it before we go to send to accounts payable. And the reason why is that there is an automation on the back end that unfortunately needs to be reformatted every time we duplicate this. So that's annoying. So whenever we're starting a project, just let me know and I can build it on the backside because it's a little bit tricky. If I were to go on automations, we'll see that these ones all say they're unable to run because they're depending on different things that kind of get broken every time we duplicate the sheet. So if you just say, hey, Deena, we created this project, or we need to create this project, it's for so-and-so, I'll go in here and update that cover sheet. As a different example, I may pull in so you all can see that information. I'll pull in good old segment 2 there. On this invoice sheet, we will see that once the status, the PM approval status changes to approved, it will automatically create a nice cover letter PDF. So here's this invoice sheet. Perfect. Okay, I'll look at the attachments on this sheet, and I see that one of them is even called HSC Capital Projects _ invoice cover sheet for pay application number 19, and then a date. So in this case, let's see, we'll open it up. And on here, all of this information automatically filled itself out, because if someone put in, they submitted, Bradbury stamp and the PO number, all of this automatically filled out, which is really, really helpful. This cover sheet goes to purchasing because purchasing really wanted a way to know that these things get approved. These are large dollar amounts. I mean, this one invoice for pay app 19, just this pay app, is still over 1.5 million. Purchasing wants to have a cover sheet saying that it has been approved by the project manager. So we worked with purchasing to make sure that we formatted it exactly how they want it, with all the information they want. This hopefully is easy for you because you don't need to fill in this information. The only part that you filled in was approving it. Even this title is actually what became like the file name. And so that's helpful because then that's one less thing you have to do. So once you approve, you'll go into this row. You want to check that attachment, just like I did here, where I opened it up. I'm going to compare it to the request that came through. And I see, okay, it's Bradbury stamp. We have the purchase order number, pay app 19. Okay, maybe I'll change it to make it customized for this project. And if I need to regenerate the letter, I always can. So that's, we could do that. The project manager, hey, everything looks great. This language, nothing changes. So I don't need to review that. That's all fine. Perfect. So then going into here, once I review it, I've already saved it. I could see there's no changes that need to be saved because my little save button is grayed out. Now I can go and send to accounts payable. So I check the box and then I hit save. When I hit save, I don't want to. Oh, that'll send two automations. One goes to accounts payable saying, hello, we received this. So rather than the vendor sending it directly to accounts payable, they're sending it to us first. So that way you can go and approve. And once you approve, then you are sending it to accounts payable just by checking the box. It ideally is making the process easier in terms of trying to track people down. Otherwise, we had where folks would need to go and, they like the vendors were submitting to accounts payable, and then accounts payable would reach out to Cindy and be like, is it good to pay? And then she would have to reach out to the project managers. And so it was like a lot of back and forth and this and that. When you check this box, it automatically sends to accounts payable. It will also send a notice to Cindy saying, we have this, we received the invoice. It's ready to pay out. It has been sent to accounts payable. So keep an eye on it. Cindy on her side has, I believe she has an email filter set up. So that way any of those emails get sent to the same spot. Once she gets notified by purchasing that they received an invoice and she needs to pay it out, then she could go to that email and say, yep, I have the information here. I can upload any documents that were missing from account payable side, like anything like that. Ideally, accounts payable, once they update their side and they take all of the invoices and the cover sheet that you had attached to this row, they'll take it, upload it into Lobomart on their side. They're supposed to, and I'm not like, I'm not going to fight with them on it, but I have seen a lot of them do it, is that they will actually check this box too, saying that they've received it and processed it. When Cindy creates hers, then she could check the box saying the receipt is created. And so both of these, both accounts payable and Cindy actually receive an email, and it asks them to check the box once they've done their step. So once they do, they send it. And when they do that, it makes it really nice on this side, because you can see that it's, if it's checked, that means that everyone has done their job. If it's not checked, it might not be, it might not be. Let's say you approved it, but for some reason we don't want to send it to accounts payable. You're going to keep on receiving a daily email unless you check the disable reminders column. Similarly, very similar column is if it's an informational invoice. Let's say if the payment has already been processed, it doesn't need to go into accounts payable, but I don't want to keep on receiving those daily email reminders. You could go into here saying, we already processed it, invoice is already good to go, but I need to put the invoice on here because it's going to feed that other sheet that we had. So let's see if I can. So it's a little slow. This goes and it feeds that cost sheet, right? So it's pulling in that total dollar amount, as we can see with our gray triangles. So it's pulling in that information. So it all invoices should come through here, but sometimes they don't need to go to accounts payable, and that's fine. So just check the box saying that. Project name, it's a formula, just pulling in the name of the project, which sometimes helps for when you're receiving these notices and you're like, cool, what project is this for? So we added that on there. This is a lot of information, especially for folks that have not done it yet. And hopefully is kind of a good refresher for those who have done it. We do have the change order process as well. I'm gonna say don't save because I don't want anything to go to purchasing. The change order process is very similar as to a vendor submits a form. They put in kind of the information for the project. Right now, this is also a little bit in flux, and so this may change, but for the time being, we have, if there's a change in the schedule, the total costs here, if it's a cost increase or decrease, we want the PO number, previous and proposed PO amounts. And I'm only blasting through this because we have like one more minute. So here we do have the project manager, they'll select when they submit the form. For the project, the PM recommendation. So this is going to be where you approve it. And Ryan, yes.
Sorry, Dina.
No, you're fine.
I just submitted a change order this morning, I think, and I was going back through my submittal, and it doesn't ask us for the vendor name. Is that correct?
I can tell you why. So the vendor name is going to be a column in there, or it should be. You might be using an old version of the form. If I go to the form itself, we'll see that that is not popping up. If I go into edit, we'll actually see a little error pop up here. So if I put the vendor subcontractor in here, actually, now it's not throwing me error. Usually it does, because if there's no drop down values in there, then it'll tell you that that field is not visible because there's no possible drop down options. So what we may need to do is just go and double check and see that the field is in your form, well, on the sheet, in the form, and that there's drop down options in there. So was that for segment 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so I could go and double check that, but we are over on time, and I do have an 11 o'clock. So before we wrap up, this is a lot of information. We are recording, so I will be sure to send that recording to everyone, so that way you could go and rewatch any sections that you need to rewatch, skip over the parts that you don't need, and be able to use this. And what we can also do is we can schedule a follow-up meeting, maybe even one that's shorter, where you're bringing any questions that you still have, because you may have additional questions that pop up from this. Once, for some of you, it's like giving you time to digest it all and something like that. So otherwise, in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me if there's things you want me to check on your sheets, such as the change order vendors, then I could go ahead and go through and do that. So I know we're out of time, and this was like a full hour and a half, so it was a lot of time. But thank you all for kind of attending and getting that high level of everything. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me for help. I know that I went over a lot of information, and I know that I'm also busy, and so sometimes I'm not able to get back to people right away, but it should be fairly quick, hopefully. So thank you all.
Thanks, Dina.
Thank you, Deena. We
Okay.
appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Deena.
Yeah, you got it. Perfect. We'll see you all later.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.